The courtroom was full that morning. People had filled every bench, whispering, waiting for another ordinary case. Reporters sat in the back, their pens ready. Lawyers carried stacks of files, and guards stood near the doors. The judge entered and took her seat, her black robe flowing behind her. She was known for being strict, fair, and cold as stone. Everyone respected her. Everyone feared her. In the center of the room stood a young man. His hands were cuffed. His eyes looked tired, but not weak. He was 21, maybe 22, with a face that had seen too much for his age. The charge against him was small, stealing food, breaking into a store. Most thought it would be a quick trial, nothing special. But then, everything changed. The young man looked straight at the judge. His lips trembled, but his voice was steady. "You're my mom." The words broke the air like thunder. At first, nobody moved. The room fell into perfect silence. People thought they had heard wrong. The guard blinked, confused. The lawyers froze. Even the reporters stopped writing. The judge's hands stiffened. For a second, her face turned pale, as if all blood had left her body. She leaned back in her chair, staring at the boy, her eyes wide. The young man did not lower his gaze. His eyes were locked on hers, full of pain but also something else, hope. Whispers began spreading in the courtroom. Did he just say? Is he serious? That can't be true. The judge tried to regain control. She lifted her gavel and struck it against the desk. Order in the court. Her voice was firm, but it shook slightly. The whispers quieted, but the shock remained. Everyone waited for her response. The boy spoke again, louder this time. "I'm telling the truth. You're my mom." Gasps filled the room. Some people covered their mouths in disbelief. A reporter's pen dropped to the floor with a sharp click. The prosecutor frowned. "Your Honor, this is ridiculous. The defendant is attempting to distract the court with lies." But the boy shook his head. His voice broke, but his words carried power. "No. I'm not lying. I've been searching for you my whole life. And now, here you are." The judge's fingers tightened on her gavel. She wanted to shout, to deny it, but her throat felt dry. She could not look away from him. Something deep inside her, something she had locked away for years, was breaking open. She remembered a night long ago. A small baby. A decision that had torn her apart. A memory she had buried under years of work, years of coldness, years of silence. No. It couldn't be. It was impossible. She forced herself to speak. "This court is not the place for your fantasies. We will proceed with the trial." Her words were sharp, but her voice cracked at the end. The boy smiled sadly, shaking his head. "I knew you would say that. But I have proof." The room erupted again. People leaned forward, desperate to see what would happen next. Even the lawyers looked shaken, unsure of what to do. The judge gripped the edge of her desk, her knuckles white. She wanted to dismiss him, to call him a liar, to end this madness. But her heart pounded too loudly in her chest. The guard stepped closer to the boy, ready to silence him. But he lifted his hands slowly, showing no threat. "All my life," he said, his voice trembling but clear, "I dreamed of this moment. To stand in front of you. To finally say the words I've held inside for so long." Tears glistened in his eyes. "You're my mother." The silence that followed was heavier than before. It wrapped around the room, pressing on everyone's chest. Nobody dared to breathe too loudly. The judge tried to hold back her emotions. She was known as the woman who never cried, who never broke. But her vision blurred, her throat burned. She blinked quickly, forcing the tears away. This is nonsense," she whispered, though it sounded more like she was speaking to herself. The boy tilted his head. "Then look me in the eyes and say you don't know me. Say you don't feel it too." Her breath caught. She couldn't answer. The prosecutor slammed his file shut. This is absurd. Your Honor, I request the court to ignore these baseless claims and continue with the trial. But the courtroom was no longer listening to him. Everyone's attention was fixed on the strange, painful connection between the judge and the boy. The judge wanted to speak, but words failed her. Her hands shook. For the first time in her career, she looked weak. Vulnerable. Human. The boy lowered his head, his voice softer now, almost breaking. I don't care if you punish me. I don't care if I go to prison. I just want you to know. I found you. And then, silence again. The reporters scribbled furiously, but their eyes kept rising from their pages, unable to stop watching. The audience leaned forward, some with tears already forming. The guards shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether they were watching a trial or a tragedy. The judge took a deep breath. She wanted to shout enough, but her voice would not come out. Instead, she sat frozen, her eyes locked on the boys. For a moment, she saw not a criminal, not a defendant, but a small child calling out to her. Her child. Her heart screamed, but her lips remained sealed. The boy stood tall, even with chains on his hands. He looked around the room, then back at her. His eyes were shining now, full of tears that he refused to let fall. Everyone thinks I'm a thief, he said quietly. But I'm just a son, looking for his mother. The words cut through every soul in the room. Even the hardest hearts felt something stir. The judge lowered her head, her shoulders trembling. She whispered something no one could hear. The boy leaned forward, listening. It sounded like a name. His name. Gasps filled the air again. And then the judge slammed the gavel down, harder than before. Court adjourned, she cried, her voice cracking. The room exploded with noise, reporters shouting questions, people crying, guards trying to control the chaos. But through it all, the boy's words echoed in every corner of the courtroom. You're my mom. The judge's chambers were usually a place of silence, a place where she gathered her thoughts between cases. But that day, silence did not bring her peace. It pressed against her chest like a weight she could not carry. She sat at her desk, her hands trembling, the echoes of his words still ringing in her mind. You're my mom. How could he say that? How dare he? And yet, how could she deny the truth that stirred deep inside her? The memory she had buried for more than 20 years clawed its way back into her thoughts. A night filled with tears. A child's cry. A choice she never forgave herself for. She had told herself it was the only way, that she had no choice. But now that same choice was staring at her in chains, calling her mother in front of the whole world. The next morning, the courtroom was even more crowded. News of the boy's shocking claim had spread like fire. Reporters filled every seat. Cameras clicked. The public wanted answers. The young man stood again, still in cuffs, but his eyes seemed stronger. He had spoken the truth once, and he was ready to speak again. The prosecutor rolled his eyes. Your Honor, I beg the court not to indulge this foolishness. The defendant is only trying to avoid punishment. But the boy spoke over him, his voice firm. I'm not trying to escape anything. I'm here to tell the truth. She is my mother. Gasps echoed again, though softer this time. People wanted details now. They wanted to know if this strange boy had any proof. The judge tried to remain calm, but her heartbeat betrayed her. She cleared her throat, her voice thin. You claim I am your mother. Explain yourself. Where does this come from? The boy took a deep breath, his eyes fixed on her. My life began in an orphanage. I never knew who left me there. But I remember a locket they found with me. A locket with the initials LH inside. I always wondered who that belonged to. The room leaned forward as if one body. The judge froze. Those were her initials. The boy continued. His voice was not angry, but filled with quiet pain. I grew up waiting. Waiting for someone to come back for me. Every night, I prayed my mother would walk through the door and take me home. But she never came. So I learned to survive alone. The judge's hands shook under the desk. She pressed her palms together to hide it. Memories stabbed at her. She remembered the very same locket, gold, heart-shaped, placed gently around a baby's neck before she left him. She had promised herself she would never think about it again. But here it was, alive, in front of her. The defense lawyer raised his hand. Your Honor, may I suggest a DNA test? It would settle this matter. The prosecutor scoffed. This is a waste of time. The boy is a criminal, nothing more. But the boy raised his voice, cutting him off. You think I want this? You think I want to stand here in front of everyone and beg for recognition? I came here because I need her to know who I am. I need her to know what she did to me. The audience shifted uncomfortably. Some wiped their eyes. The judge swallowed hard, trying to regain her strength. This court will not be turned into a stage for emotions. We are here for the law. The boy stared at her, his eyes fierce, his voice raw. Law? What about love? What about the child you left behind? The words struck her like a blade. She flinched, though she tried to hide it. The room noticed. The boy lowered his voice, softer now, almost like a whisper meant only for her. I remember a song. A lullaby. They told me I used to hum it in my sleep when I was little. It went like this. And then, slowly, painfully, he began to hum. The melody was broken, unfinished, but familiar. Too familiar. The judge's heart stopped. That lullaby. It was the song she used to sing when she rocked her baby to sleep. A song no one else could have known. Gasps filled the room once more as people saw her face change. The cold judge, always calm, was now trembling, her lips quivering, her eyes wet. The boy stopped humming. His voice shook. Tell me I'm lying now. The silence in the room was unbearable. Reporters scribbled with wide eyes. Even the guards shifted nervously. Something bigger than law was unfolding before them. Finally, the defense lawyer spoke again. Your Honor, this is undeniable. For the sake of justice and truth, I request the court order a DNA test immediately. The prosecutor stood, furious. This is outrageous. We are wasting the court's time with emotional games. This boy is playing on sympathy. He's a thief, nothing more. The boy's eyes burned with anger. Maybe I am a thief, he said, his voice sharp. But what I stole was survival. Food. Shelter. A chance to live when the world turned its back on me. Tell me, prosecutor, if your mother had abandoned you, what would you have done? The question struck hard. The prosecutor opened his mouth, but no words came out. All eyes turned to the judge. She sat frozen, her robe heavy on her shoulders. Inside, her soul was breaking. She wanted to scream, to confess, to run. But she was trapped between two lives, her life as a judge, and her life as a mother she had buried long ago. The boy's voice softened again, tears sliding down his face. I don't care what anyone here thinks. I don't care if they call me a liar. I came here to look at you and tell you the truth. I came here to remind you that you once had a son. And he's standing right here. The judge's lips parted, but no sound came out. She lowered her head, hiding her tears from the crowd. The audience whispered louder, some shocked, some touched. Reporters wrote with trembling hands. And then, as if the universe itself demanded it, a clerk entered the room with an envelope. The results of the DNA test. The courtroom erupted. The boy's heart raced. The judge's chest tightened. The clerk placed the envelope on the judge's desk. The world seemed to stop. With shaking hands, the judge reached for it. She hesitated, staring at the paper that could shatter or confirm her entire life. The boy watched, his eyes wide, his lips trembling. Everyone in the courtroom leaned forward, holding their breath. The judge closed her eyes, pressing the envelope to her chest. And then she whispered, so softly only she could hear. God, what have I done? The envelope sat unopened on the judge's desk, but the boy's words had already cut deeper than any paper could. The courtroom waited, the air heavy with tension, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. The boy lowered his head, his voice trembling but loud enough for everyone to hear. You want proof? You want facts? Then listen to my life. The judge closed her eyes. She wanted to stop him, but her voice would not come out. Deep down, she knew the truth was coming whether she allowed it or not. The boy lifted his head. His face was pale, his eyes tired, but his voice carried the weight of years of pain. I grew up in places no child should grow up in. I learned to fight before I learned to read. I learned to steal before I learned to write. And every night, when I closed my eyes, I dreamed of a face I never saw. A mother's face. The audience fell silent, leaning closer. Even the prosecutor's anger faded for a moment as the story unfolded. The boy took a deep breath. The orphanage was cold. Not just the air, the people too. Caretakers came and went. Some shouted, some hit, some ignored us. I remember winters when the windows were broken and the wind cut through like knives. We huddled together under thin blankets, hoping the night would end. He paused, his lips shaking. Other kids were adopted. I wasn't. They said I was too wild, too angry. But what they didn't understand was that I wasn't angry. I was empty. Every time a door opened, I thought maybe, just maybe, it would be her. That she'd finally come back for me. But it was never her. Never. The judge's nails dug into the wood of her desk. Her heart twisted with every word. She had built her life on control, but here in this courtroom, that control was slipping through her fingers like sand. The boy's eyes glistened as he continued. When I was 10, they sent me to foster homes. Some families were kind, but I was never really theirs. Some were cruel. They locked the fridge, they locked the doors, they locked me in. I started running away. Sometimes for days, sometimes for weeks. And when I had nothing, I stole. Bread, apples, anything that would keep me alive. His voice cracked, but he forced himself to keep going. People called me a criminal. Teachers called me broken. But I wasn't broken. I was just lost. And no one wanted to find me. The courtroom was no longer a courtroom, it was a stage of memories, a window into the boy's suffering. Even the reporters stopped writing. Their pens rested, forgotten, as tears filled their eyes. The judge felt her throat burn. She wanted to stand, to run to him, to tell him she was sorry. But she sat frozen, trapped by her robe, by her role, by the walls she had built around her heart. The boy looked at her, his voice soft now. Do you know what it's like to wait for someone who never comes? To lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, asking why you weren't enough? Why your own mother didn't want you? The words stabbed straight into her chest. Her lips trembled, but she pressed them together, fighting to stay silent. He shook his head, wiping a tear with his cuffed hand. I grew up thinking I must have been a mistake. That maybe I was too ugly, too weak, too small. That's why she left. That's why she didn't come back. The judge's vision blurred. The world around her disappeared. All she saw was a baby's face, soft and small, crying in her arms all those years ago. She remembered the night she let him go. The night she made the choice that would haunt her forever. The boy's voice grew harder, sharper. I tried to bury the pain. I tried to survive. But no matter what I did, the question never left me. Who am I? Where do I come from? And why did she throw me away? Gasps rippled through the courtroom. People covered their mouths. Some shook their heads, unable to believe the pain one child had carried alone. The defense lawyer stood slowly. His voice was gentle, careful. Your Honor, with every word this young man speaks, it becomes clear this is not a trick. This is not a lie. This is his truth. The prosecutor opened his mouth to argue, but the words died before they left his throat. Even he could feel the weight in the room. The boy looked at the judge one last time, his voice breaking completely. I didn't come here to make you look weak. I didn't come here to embarrass you. I came here because I had to. Because I couldn't carry the question anymore. I had to know if my mother, the woman I dreamed of, the woman I prayed for, was real. His tears finally fell, sliding down his cheeks. And now I know. She's real. She's standing right in front of me. The judge's hands shook. Her gavel slipped and hit the desk with a dull thud. Her body trembled as tears finally escaped her eyes. She turned her head, but the audience had already seen. The cold judge, the woman who never broke, was crying. The boy lowered his voice to a whisper, barely audible but clear enough to pierce every heart in the room. I'm not asking for freedom. I'm not asking for mercy. I'm just asking for you to see me, not as a thief. Not as a criminal. Just as your son. The room was silent. No cough, no shuffle, no whisper. Only the sound of a boy's tears and a mother's silent sobs. Finally, the defense lawyer spoke again, his voice steady. There is only one way to end this doubt. Only one way to bring the truth to light. The DNA results are here. Let them speak. The judge's hand hovered over the envelope. Her fingers trembled. She wanted to open it. She feared to open it. The boy watched her, his eyes filled with both pain and hope. Every soul in the room leaned forward, breathless. The judge slowly slid her finger under the seal. But before she could pull out the paper, her tears dropped onto the envelope, staining it. The boy whispered through his tears, "It's okay. I already know." The courtroom gasped again, caught between silence and shock. And still, the envelope remained unopened, heavy with answers that could change everything. The envelope lay on the judge's desk like a silent weapon. Everyone in the courtroom stared at it, as if the thin piece of paper inside could change history. The boy stood tall, his wrists still chained, his eyes locked on the woman who might finally be revealed as his mother. The judge's hands trembled as she touched the envelope. Her throat was dry, her chest heavy. She had faced murderers, liars, and criminals without fear, but this paper terrified her. She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them. Before we read this, she whispered, her voice unsteady, I want to hear what else you claim as proof. The boy nodded slowly. His voice was steady, but his face showed the storm inside him. When I was 6, he said, the orphanage gave me something. They said it was the only thing I was left with. I've carried it my whole life. His hand reached into the pocket of his worn jacket. The guard moved closer, cautious, but the boy only pulled out a small chain. Dangling from it was an old, heart-shaped locket. Gasps filled the room. The metal was scratched, the gold faded, but it still shone faintly under the courtroom lights. The judge's eyes widened. Her breath caught. She knew that locket. She had placed it around her baby's neck herself, the night she let him go. Inside was a picture of her younger self, smiling, and a name she had written with trembling hands. The boy held it up. His fingers shook as he opened it. Inside was the tiny photograph of a young woman. He turned it toward the judge. This is you. I don't need a test to prove it. I've carried you with me every day of my life. The room exploded with whispers, gasps, even sobs. Reporters leaned forward, cameras flashing. Some of the jurors wiped their eyes. The judge covered her mouth with her hand. Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. The image staring back at her was one she had tried to forget, but it was her. Her face. Her youth. Her mistake. The prosecutor jumped to his feet, his voice desperate. This is not evidence. Anyone could have found that locket. It proves nothing. But no one believed him. Even his voice lacked strength now. The boy shook his head. His voice grew louder, filled with pain and strength at the same time. You think I stole this too? No. This was all I had. When I was hungry, I sold everything else I owned. But never this. Because this was the only thing that told me I wasn't completely alone. The courtroom fell into silence again. The judge's shoulders shook as she tried to hold herself together. She wanted to reach out, to take the locket in her hands, to feel what she had once given away. But she forced herself to stay seated, to stay the judge, not the mother. Finally, with trembling fingers, she picked up the envelope again. "The court will read the DNA results," she announced, though her voice was barely above a whisper. The clerk stepped forward nervously, offering to read it for her. But the judge shook her head. This was her burden. She tore the seal open. Her hand shook so violently that the paper nearly slipped. She unfolded it slowly, her eyes scanning the lines. Everyone in the room leaned forward, the air heavy with silence. Her lips parted. Her voice cracked. "The test concludes, with a 99.9% probability, that the defendant is biologically related to the judge." The room erupted. Gasps, cries, shouts, everyone spoke at once. Reporters shouted questions. Lawyers dropped their pens. Even the guards exchanged stunned looks. The boy's eyes closed. His body sagged with relief, but tears rolled down his face. For years, he had dreamed of this moment. Now it was real. He wasn't crazy. He wasn't imagining. He had found her. The judge dropped the paper. Her hands covered her face as sobs shook her body. The cold, untouchable judge was gone. Before the whole world, she broke. The prosecutor slammed his hand on the table. This changes nothing. He is still a criminal." But no one was listening to him anymore. The boy's chains rattled as he stepped forward. His voice was soft, but the whole courtroom heard. "I don't care about the law right now. I don't care if you send me to prison. I just needed to know if I was right. I just needed to know if my mother was real." His words sliced through the noise. The audience fell silent again. The judge lowered her hands. Her tear-streaked face really looked at him, for the first time. She saw not a criminal, not a case, not a stranger. She saw her son. Her lips trembled. Her voice broke. "My son." The boy's knees nearly gave out. His lips formed the word he had never said before. "Mom." The sound of it hit her like lightning. She covered her mouth, choking on a sob. The whole room felt the weight of that single word. The boy held up the locket again. His voice trembled. "You left me with this. You left me with nothing else. But I kept it. Because I believed you'd come back. I believed you still remembered me." The judge reached out, her fingers trembling, but then pulled back. She couldn't touch him. Not yet. Her robe, her position, her shame held her back. The boy lowered his hand, tears falling freely now. "I don't want your mercy. I don't want your forgiveness. I just want you to know that I'm here. That I survived. That I never stopped looking for you." The judge shook her head, her heart shattering. She whispered, though everyone heard, "I should have never let you go." The audience sobbed openly now. Even the guards wiped at their eyes. The prosecutor tried again, his voice shaking. "Your Honor, the court must return to." But his words were drowned out. No one cared about the trial anymore. They were witnessing something greater than law, something raw, something human. The boy looked at the judge one last time, his voice steady even through his tears. "You may punish me. You may call me guilty. But before you do, look at me. Not as a judge. Not as a stranger. Look at me as your son." The judge couldn't hold it in any longer. Her sobs shook the entire courtroom. She slammed the gavel weakly, her voice breaking. Court adjourned. The room erupted again, reporters shouting, people crying, cameras flashing. But in the middle of the storm, there were only two people who truly existed, a mother and a son, standing on opposite sides of the law, bound by truth at last. The courtroom was no longer the same place. A moment ago, it had been about law and order, rules and punishment. Now it was filled with something much heavier: truth, pain, and love that had been buried for years. The DNA papers still lay on the judge's desk. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, but no one dared move too close. The audience was frozen, waiting. Everyone wanted to know the same thing: what would the judge say? The boy stood silently, the locket in his hand, his eyes never leaving hers. He had waited his whole life for this moment. Now he waited again, for her words, for her answer, for her truth. The judge wiped her tears with a shaking hand. She took a deep breath, but her chest rose and fell unevenly. For years, she had hidden behind a mask of strength. Now that mask was broken. Her voice trembled when she spoke. "I never thought this day would come. I never thought I would see you again." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some clapped their hands over their mouths. Others leaned forward so far they nearly fell from their seats. The boy's lips parted. He had dreamed of this, but hearing her say it made his knees weak. The judge looked down at her desk, unable to meet his eyes. Her words came slowly, heavy with regret. "Years ago. I was just a girl. I was young, lost, and afraid. I didn't have money. I didn't have support. All I had was you. And I loved you, God knows I loved you, but the world was cruel. I was told I couldn't raise you. That I would ruin both our lives if I tried." Her voice broke. She pressed her hand against her chest, as if the pain inside her heart was too much to bear. "They said it was better to give you up. Better to let someone else take care of you. I told myself it was the right thing. I told myself you would grow up safe, happy, loved. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself." The boy's eyes filled with tears. His voice cracked. "Then why? Why didn't you come back for me? Why didn't you try?" The courtroom held its breath. Everyone wanted to hear her answer. The judge's tears streamed down her cheeks as she forced herself to look at him. "Because I was a coward," she whispered. "Every day, I thought about you. Every day, I wondered where you were, if you were safe, if you hated me. But the more time passed, the more afraid I became. Afraid that if I found you, you would turn away. Afraid that you wouldn't forgive me. So I stayed silent. I buried myself in work, in law, in this robe, because it was easier to be a judge than to be a mother who failed her son." The boy's breath shook. His lips trembled, but no sound came out. The audience was crying now. Even the reporters had tears in their eyes as they scribbled furiously, capturing every word. The judge continued, her voice stronger now, though still broken. "I told myself I had no choice. But the truth is, I made a choice. I chose fear. I chose shame. And because of that, I lost you." She lowered her head, unable to look at him. "I am sorry. More sorry than words can ever say. You didn't deserve the life you had. You didn't deserve the pain. That is my fault. All of it." The boy's tears finally spilled over. His whole body shook. "Do you know how many nights I waited? How many times I prayed you would come through the door? Do you know what it felt like to watch other kids go home with parents while I stayed behind, alone?" The judge covered her mouth, sobbing openly now. "Yes," she whispered. "I do. Because every night, I sat alone too. I held the memory of you in my arms and wondered if you were still alive. I punished myself with the thought that maybe you hated me. That maybe you were right too." The boy stepped closer. His chains rattled, echoing through the silent courtroom. His voice was raw. "I don't know if I can forgive you." The judge's heart shattered. She lowered her head in shame, her tears falling onto the wooden desk. "I don't ask for forgiveness," she said softly. "I don't deserve it. All I ask is that you believe me when I say, I loved you. I still love you. I never stopped." The audience sobbed quietly. Even the guards wiped their eyes. The room felt less like a courtroom and more like a confessional, a place where sins and sorrows were finally laid bare. The boy's chest heaved. He looked down at the locket in his hand, then back at her. All my life, I carried this because I believed you would come back for me. But you didn't. I kept believing anyway. And now I don't know what to feel. The judge pressed her trembling hands together, begging silently. Feel whatever you need to feel. Hate me. Curse me. But please, son, don't doubt this. She placed her hand over her heart. I never stopped loving you. The boy stared at her, his vision blurred with tears. Silence stretched through the courtroom. It was the kind of silence that made people hold their breath, afraid to disturb something sacred. Then, in a voice so soft it barely carried across the room, the boy whispered. I wanted a mother. Not a judge. Not an explanation. Just a mother. The judge broke completely. She pushed back her chair, standing on trembling legs. Her robe seemed too heavy now, a symbol of the wall she had built between them. She pulled it off. It slid to the floor. Gasps filled the room. The cold, untouchable judge had stepped down not as a judge, but as a woman. As a mother. Her eyes locked on his. I am not your judge. I am your mother. The boy's tears flowed freely. His knees gave out, and he fell forward into the arms of the guards. The audience cried openly. Some even clapped, others prayed under their breath. Reporters scribbled as fast as they could, knowing they were witnessing a story the world would never forget. The judge stepped closer to the boy, but stopped just short of touching him. She wanted to hold him, but she was afraid. Afraid he might pull away. Afraid she had no right. The boy looked up at her, his voice weak. Then prove it. Not with words. With actions. The judge froze, tears blurring her vision. She didn't know if he meant today, tomorrow, or for the rest of their lives. But she knew this much, he was giving her a chance. A chance she thought she had lost forever. And she would not waste it. The courtroom was no longer just a place of law. It had turned into something else, something raw, human, and unforgettable. The judge's robe lay on the floor like a symbol of her past mistakes, and she stood before her son not as a judge, not as a figure of power, but as a woman who had lost and found him again. The audience sat in silence. Some were crying softly, others holding hands, afraid to breathe too loudly. The guards looked uneasy, as if they had no idea whether to treat the boy as a prisoner or as a broken child who had just found his mother. The boy's words echoed in the room, then prove it. Not with words. With actions. The judge felt those words pierce her deeper than any law, deeper than any punishment she had ever given in her life. She had spent years handing out sentences, but now, for the first time, she was the one being judged. Her son was her judge. She looked at him with trembling eyes. You are right, she said softly. Words are easy. Actions are hard. But I will prove it, not just here, for the rest of my life. The boy's lips pressed into a thin line. His face showed anger, hurt, but also hope, faint, fragile, yet alive. The lawyers shifted uncomfortably. One finally spoke. Your Honor, he stopped himself, correcting, Judge, this is irregular. The case. No, the judge interrupted firmly, her voice strong again. This is not about the case anymore. This is about truth. And truth is the foundation of law. Her words silenced him. The boy lowered his head. His chains rattled as he tried to steady himself. The sound cut through the room like thunder, reminding everyone he was still a prisoner. The judge's heart broke again. She stepped closer, her voice shaking. Take off his chains. The guard hesitated. But, ma'am. I said, her voice thundered, louder than anyone had ever heard it, take them off. The room gasped. The guards looked at each other nervously, then obeyed. Slowly, they unlocked the chains. One by one, the heavy pieces of iron clattered to the floor. The boy rubbed his wrists, red and sore. For the first time, he stood free, not in the world, but in spirit. The judge reached out her hand, trembling. I failed you once. I will not fail you again. Whatever punishment the world gives, I will stand with you. As your mother. The boy looked at her hand. The moment stretched forever. He could reject her, turn away, let his anger win. Or he could take the hand and accept the chance he had wanted his whole life. The audience leaned forward, desperate for his choice. The boy's chest rose and fell heavily. Then, slowly, painfully, he lifted his hand and placed it in hers. The room erupted with gasps and cries. The judge broke into sobs. She pulled him into her arms, holding him tightly, as if afraid he might disappear again. He resisted for only a second, then collapsed into her embrace, crying like the child he had once been. For the first time in years, mother and son were together. The courtroom that had seen criminals, liars, and punishments now witnessed something it had never seen before: redemption. Reporters scribbled wildly, their papers wet with tears. The audience clapped, some stood and applauded, others cried openly. Even the guards looked away, blinking their own tears back. The lawyer muttered, This isn't in the book. The judge, holding her son, answered without looking at him. Not everything worth living for is in the book. Her son pulled back slightly, his voice broken but firm. I don't know if I can forgive everything. But I don't want to be alone anymore. The judge cupped his face gently, her tears dripping onto his cheeks. You won't be. Never again. Whatever it takes, I will be there. That is my final verdict. The audience stood, clapping and crying. The sound filled the hall like thunder, like a wave washing away years of silence. The boy leaned against her, weak but alive, and whispered, I wanted a mother. I finally found one. The judge closed her eyes and whispered back, and I finally found my son. The moment was so powerful that even the court stenographer stopped typing, wiping her eyes. For once, justice wasn't written in law books or carved into verdicts. It was written in hearts, in forgiveness, in the bond between a mother and her child. The judge stepped back, holding his hand. She looked at the audience, at the lawyers, at the guards. This court is adjourned, she said softly. Because today is not about guilt or innocence. Today is about love. And with that, she walked out of the courtroom, no longer a judge in black robes, but a mother in tears, holding the hand of her son. The cameras followed, the people whispered, but none of it mattered. What mattered was that, after years of silence and pain, a mother and son had finally spoken the only words that truly counted. You are mine. And I will never let you go again.